Mark Lawson had always loved the calm predictability of Willow Creek. Nestled in the quiet suburbs, the community promised a peaceful retreat from the chaotic city life he had left behind. When he bought his cozy two-story home 5 years ago, the neighborhood had charm, good neighbors, and an HOA that was mostly invisible, until now. That afternoon, as Mark checked his mailbox, he found something unusual. Among the usual flyers and bills was a thick envelope stamped with the Willow Creek HOA logo. Curious, he ripped it open, expecting the standard monthly assessment. But what he found inside made his heart skip. A formal letter from the HOA board demanded an extra payment, a special assessment of nearly $1,200, to cover expenses related to the Community Wellness Spa project. Mark frowned. Community Wellness Spa? That didn't ring any bells. He had never heard of any plan to install a spa in the neighborhood. He flipped through the pages. There were glossy photos of a sleek, modern spa complex, steam rooms, hot tubs, and lounge areas. The board's letter was polite but firm. The assessment was mandatory, and failure to pay would result in fines and possible liens on homeowners' properties. Mark's mind raced. There had been no announcement, no vote, no newsletter, nothing about a spa. Why was the board charging every homeowner for something so extravagant without any input? That evening, Mark stood on his porch, staring across the street. Most neighbors had their blinds drawn. A few cars rolled by, but no one seemed to be talking. He remembered the last HOA meeting he attended months ago. No mention of a spa. What had changed? And why was the board acting so secretively? The next day, Mark stopped by Mrs. Alvarez's house. The retired schoolteacher was one of the few neighbors he trusted. He showed her the letter. "Oh, that," she said, lowering her voice. "I heard some whispers at the grocery store. They say the HOA board got some special funding from a local developer, but no one knows the details. The spa's just the tip of the iceberg. Folks are scared to ask questions." Mark felt a chill. Special funding? That sounded more like a deal behind closed doors than a community project. He wondered if the board was hiding something, or worse, pulling a fast one on everyone. Determined to find out, Mark logged into the HOA website. The usual meeting minutes ended months ago. The financial reports were vague, listing miscellaneous improvements, but no specifics. He clicked through dozens of PDFs but found no reference to the spa or any special assessments. He tried calling the HOA office but only reached a voicemail. His emails went unanswered. Mark's gut told him something was very wrong. Over the next few days, he discreetly knocked on doors, trying to gauge if anyone else had received the spa bill. Most homeowners either hadn't seen it yet or were too afraid to talk. One young couple quietly said they planned to pay, hoping to avoid trouble. Another elderly man avoided eye contact and quickly shut the door. The quiet tension in the neighborhood was palpable, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to break. Then, late one evening, Mark noticed a black SUV slowly cruising down his street. Its windows were tinted, but the driver seemed to be watching. When Mark stepped outside to get a better look, the SUV sped off without a word. His pulse quickened. Was he being followed? Intimidated? Mark clenched his fists. If the HOA board wanted him to pay for their secret spa, they were about to find out he wasn't the kind of homeowner who backed down quietly. Whatever the spa was really about, Mark knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The next morning, Mark awoke to a restless city humming faintly beneath his bedroom window. Yet Willow Creek, his quiet sanctuary, felt charged with an undercurrent he couldn't ignore. The spa fee letter lingered in his mind, a stubborn knot tightening every time he thought about it. Determined not to be intimidated, Mark started his day with a mission to find out exactly what was going on behind the HOA's closed doors. He began by visiting the community clubhouse, where the HOA meetings were typically held. The building, usually warm and inviting, seemed cold and deserted. Mark found a small bulletin board near the entrance cluttered with outdated flyers, none mentioning the spa or any special assessments. He jotted down the dates of the last few meetings and decided to get copies of the official minutes from the HOA secretary. The next day, he emailed the board requesting these documents, emphasizing his right as a homeowner to full transparency. Hours passed with no reply. Frustration mounting, Mark called the local city hall's records office to see if there was any public documentation of permits or contracts for the spa installation. The clerk informed him that no permits had been filed for any new construction in Willow Creek recently. Strange, Mark murmured. If the spa was real, how could it be built or even planned without city permits? Later that afternoon, Mark found himself at the neighborhood grocery store. The aisles buzzed with small talk and familiar faces. He approached Linda, the cashier who had lived in Willow Creek for decades. "Linda," Mark said, lowering his voice, "have you heard anything about this new spa the HOA says we have to pay for? I got this crazy bill yesterday, but no one's been upfront about it." Linda's eyes flickered toward the checkout line as if wary of being overheard. "People talk, Mark, but mostly in whispers. The board's been meeting privately with some slick developer, someone no one around here trusts. Rumors say the spa is just a front for something bigger. No one's sure what exactly." Mark's heart pounded. A front? Bigger than a spa? The air seemed thicker, heavier with unspoken fears. That evening, Mark sat at his kitchen table, a growing stack of HOA documents spread before him. The financial statements were murky. Large sums listed as consulting fees and improvement projects, but no clear explanation. He scoured community newsletters and online forums where homeowners quietly vented their frustrations but seemed afraid to act. One anonymous post caught his attention. "If you ask too many questions, they come after you." Chills ran down Mark's spine. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, it's better for everyone." His fingers trembled as he stared at the screen. Was this a prank? Or something more sinister? The next day, Mark confronted his neighbor, Peter, a quiet man who'd served on the HOA board years ago. Mark hoped for insight or at least confirmation of the rumors. Peter's face tightened when Mark mentioned the spa fee. "The board's changed. It's not what it used to be. They're running things for their own gain now," he said quietly. "If you get involved too much, you could find yourself in trouble. Some people already have." "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" Mark asked, his voice low. Peter glanced around nervously. "They can make your life miserable with liens, fines, even legal battles, and they don't care who they hurt." Mark's stomach churned. This wasn't just a neighborhood disagreement. It was a calculated power play. The board wielded control like a weapon, and he was now in their crosshairs. As twilight deepened, Mark's phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "Leave it alone, Mark. You don't know what you're messing with." But Mark wasn't about to back down. If anything, the threats had ignited a fire within him. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became. The spa fee was a smokescreen, masking corruption and greed that threatened the entire community. Mark knew he was stepping into dangerous territory. Eyes watched, secrets whispered in shadows, and a silent war brewed beneath the surface of Willow Creek's manicured lawns, and Mark was ready to face it head-on. Mark's frustration simmered beneath a calm exterior as the date of the next HOA meeting approached. The invitation came with no hint of the brewing storm, just a standard notice with an agenda listing community updates. But Mark knew better. He was ready to confront the board and demand answers. The evening of the meeting, Mark entered the community clubhouse, its fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Rows of folding chairs filled slowly as neighbors gathered, murmuring quietly. The usual polite smiles felt brittle, and many eyes flicked nervously toward the long table where the board members sat. Mark spotted the familiar faces. Angela, the HOA president with her perfectly coiffed hair and cool smile. Jim, the treasurer, whose thin lips rarely curved upward, and Carl, the secretary, who avoided eye contact. When the meeting began, Angela took the floor with practiced ease. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Tonight we'll discuss some exciting community improvements," she announced, her voice smooth but rehearsed. Mark's heart pounded. When it was his turn to speak, he stood and cleared his throat. "I'd like to address the special assessment for the spa," he began, holding up the bill. "No one in this community was informed or consulted before this fee was levied. I demand transparency. What exactly is this project? How was it approved? And why are we being charged without a vote?" Angela's eyes flickered coldly, but she kept her smile. "Mark, the board made this decision in the best interest of the community," she said. "The spa is a wellness initiative intended to increase property values and attract new residents. It was authorized through standard procedures outlined in the bylaws." Mark shook his head. "There was no vote, no notice. I checked. The financials don't reflect this expense until now. Something's not right." Jim leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "If you continue to disrupt the meeting, we'll have to take further action. We have protocols to maintain order." A hush fell over the room. Mark felt the weight of dozens of eyes turning toward him, some wary, others coldly indifferent. Angela's smile tightened. "Let me be clear. Failure to pay the special assessment will result in fines and possible liens on your property. This is not a threat, but a legal obligation." The unspoken message hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Mark swallowed hard. This wasn't just an invitation to pay. It was a warning. The board held power to punish dissenters, and the community seemed paralyzed by fear. After the meeting, as the crowd dispersed, Mark overheard hushed conversations. "They're strong-arming us," whispered a middle-aged woman. "Who wants to risk a lien on their home?" muttered an elderly man. Mark's phone vibrated in his pocket. Another anonymous message. "Know your place, Mark." His blood ran cold. On his way home, Mark noticed a black SUV parked suspiciously near his driveway. The driver's face was obscured by tinted windows, but Mark felt the silent threat. Inside his house, he stared at the letter again, the weight of the board's power pressing down on him. He realized that fighting this wasn't just about the spa fee anymore. It was about standing up to a shadowy force that controlled not only his community, but the very roof over his head. Determined but wary, Mark knew the road ahead would be dangerous. The board had made their position clear: comply quietly or suffer the consequences. But Mark wasn't about to give in. Mark spent the next few days walking through the neighborhood like a man on a secret mission. Every knock on a door felt like a risk. Every glance over his shoulder a reminder that he was no longer just a homeowner. He was a threat to the board's carefully maintained silence. At first, most neighbors shut their doors or offered polite but cautious smiles. The fear was thick in the air, an invisible barrier between Mark and the people he'd once called friends. But persistence paid off. One evening, Mark found himself on the porch of Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly widow who had lived in Willow Creek since its founding. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, scanned Mark carefully before inviting him in. "I'm not afraid of them," she whispered, lowering her voice. "The board's been squeezing us dry for years. This spa nonsense is just the latest scheme to bleed us." Mark leaned in. "Have you seen anything else? Heard rumors?" Mrs. Jenkins nodded slowly. "There have been strange meetings at night. The board meeting with some man from the city, a developer, I think. No one knows what they're planning, but the money flows in and out like water through a sieve." Mark's pulse quickened. "And the spa? Is it real?" She shook her head. "No, not yet. It's a lie to hide something bigger." Encouraged by Mrs. Jenkins's courage, Mark began gathering a small group of trusted neighbors, quiet warriors ready to fight back. They met secretly in basements, garages, and once in the shadowy corner of a local cafe after hours. Together, they pooled what little information they had: missing financial records, odd contracts, unexplained bank withdrawals. Mark took the lead, using his legal research skills to comb through documents, searching for cracks in the board's armor. But their movement didn't go unnoticed. One night, as Mark left a meeting, he found a note slipped under his door. "Stop now or you'll, regret it." The handwriting was hurried, jagged, threatening. Mark's stomach twisted, but he refused to be cowed. If anything, the threats confirmed they were onto something real, something dangerous enough to provoke such fear. The group's meetings became more frequent and tense. They shared stories of intimidation, neighbors who had suddenly received massive fines, properties suddenly targeted with liens, phone calls with heavy breathing on the other end. Mark himself had started noticing strange cars parked near his house at odd hours, and his phone buzzed with anonymous messages warning him to drop the fight. Yet the closer they got to the truth, the clearer it became. The spa was a smokescreen. The HOA board wasn't just trying to make homeowners pay for luxury. They were hiding debts, maybe worse. Late one night, Mark's group uncovered a trail leading to a series of loans taken out in the HOA's name. The loans were suspiciously large and tied to shell companies with no clear connection to Willow Creek. The chilling realization hit. The board had gambled the entire community's future on this spa project, except the spa was never meant to be built. It was a front for embezzlement, and if the loans defaulted, the entire property could be seized. Mark stared at the documents in disbelief. They had uncovered a ticking time bomb beneath their neighborhood's pristine lawns and white picket fences. As the weight of the truth settled, Mark felt the full scope of what was at stake. This wasn't just about unfair fees. This was about a corrupt board risking everything for greed, leaving the homeowners to face ruin. Determined to protect his home and neighbors, Mark began drafting plans to expose the corruption. But the closer he got, the more dangerous it became. Because in Willow Creek, some secrets were protected by more than just silence. They were protected by fear. Mark's nights grew restless, haunted by the trail of documents he and his small band of allies had uncovered. The HOA board's secret loans, the forged financial reports, the threats, all pointed toward a catastrophic reckoning looming just beneath Willow Creek's manicured lawns. He had contacted a lawyer, Jessica Moreno, a sharp-minded advocate with a reputation for fighting small communities' battles against corrupt boards. When Mark laid out the evidence, Jessica's eyes darkened. "This isn't just mismanagement," she said grimly. "This is fraud, and whoever's behind this has gambled the entire community's future." Jessica advised Mark to tread carefully. The board had means to retaliate, and they weren't shy about using them. Days later, Mark's mailbox held another ominous letter. This time, it wasn't just a demand for payment. The HOA board threatened a lien on his property. Failure to pay the spa assessment by the deadline will result in immediate legal action, including placing a lien on your home, the letter read, cold and official. Mark's heart pounded. A lien meant freezing his home's equity, a crippling legal claim that could force a foreclosure. He called Jessica immediately. "They're bluffing," Jessica said after reviewing the letter, "but it's a dangerous bluff. The board is trying to scare you into silence." Mark wasn't convinced. He had learned the hard way that the board's power was real and ruthless. Determined to fight, Mark gathered his neighbors for an emergency meeting. The tension was palpable as he laid out the plan to challenge the board legally. But during the meeting, a chilling revelation emerged. One neighbor, Sarah, held up a packet of documents she'd found slipped under her door, lien paperwork for several homes, some with forged signatures. "It's happening to others," she said, voice trembling. "They're using forged documents to scare us. I'm terrified." Mark's blood ran cold. The board wasn't just threatening liens, they were fabricating them. Jessica arranged for an urgent meeting with the HOA's attorney, demanding the Board cease all illegal actions. The board refused to back down. Behind the scenes, Mark's legal team began preparing to file a lawsuit to invalidate the fraudulent liens and expose the board's corruption. But the cost was high. Mark's phone continued buzzing with anonymous threats. Back off, or lose everything. Cars circled his home at night, and someone slashed his tires while he was at work. Mark's quiet neighborhood was becoming a battlefield. Still, the more the board tightened their grip, the more Mark's resolve strengthened. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every homeowner trapped under the board's shadow, and he vowed to bring the truth into the light, no matter the cost. The weight of the mounting threats pressed heavily on Mark's shoulders as he pored over the documents Jessica had obtained. The HOA board's deception was deeper than he imagined. Beyond the forged liens and secret loans, a far darker reality emerged. The entire Willow Creek HOA property, the clubhouse, the pool, the so-called spa area, and even the surrounding communal land, was at risk of foreclosure. Jessica had uncovered notices filed in the county clerk's office indicating that one of the shell companies tied to the HOA's loans had defaulted. The bank was moving swiftly to seize the property tied to the debt. "This is worse than I thought," Jessica said, grimly. "If the foreclosure goes through, the bank will auction off the entire community property to recover their losses. That means the board's greed could cost every homeowner their shared assets, and possibly their homes too." Mark felt a cold surge of panic. The spa fee, the hidden loans, the intimidation, it was all a cover-up for financial ruin. The HOA board had gambled and lost, and now the entire neighborhood faced a devastating fallout. Mark immediately called an emergency, meeting with his trusted group of neighbors. The air in the room was thick with fear and disbelief. "We need to act fast," Mark told them. "If the foreclosure happens, we lose everything. The clubhouse, the green spaces, the pool, the heart of this community." "Is there anything we can do?" asked Mrs. Jenkins, her voice shaky but determined. Jessica joined the group via video call, outlining a plan to stop the foreclosure. "We're going to file a lawsuit challenging the validity of the loans and liens. We'll argue the board acted fraudulently and without proper authority. But we have to move quickly." Mark's phone buzzed again with a threatening message. "Drop this fight or watch your home vanish." Despite the warnings, Mark's resolve hardened. He reached out to local reporters, hoping to bring media attention to the scandal. If the truth came to light publicly, the board might be forced to back down. Within days, a journalist from the city newspaper called. She had heard whispers about the HOA's troubles and wanted to investigate. Mark shared what he could safely, careful not to put neighbors at greater risk. The journalist's interest sparked hope, but also increased danger. That same night, Mark's mailbox was flooded with anonymous flyers warning residents to stay silent or face consequences. Then, a surprising call came from an unexpected source. One of the HOA board members, Carl, the secretary. "I can't take this anymore," he confessed in a hushed voice. "They're covering up everything. If you want to save the community, I'll help you." Mark listened intently. Carl offered access to internal documents, meeting recordings, and bank statements, proof of the board's corruption. But trust was fragile. Mark agreed to meet Carl at a discreet location, wary but desperate for evidence. When the night of the meeting arrived, Mark's nerves were taut. He spotted Carl waiting near the community park, glancing nervously around. Carl handed over a folder thick with incriminating documents. "This will blow it wide open," Carl whispered. "But be careful. They're watching." As Mark walked away, heart pounding, he knew the stakes had never been higher. The board wasn't just corrupt. They were desperate, dangerous, and willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way. But with Carl's help, Mark finally held the key to unraveling the entire scheme, and maybe, just maybe, saving Willow Creek. The night air was crisp and heavy with anticipation as Mark sat in his dimly lit living room, the folder Carl had given him spread open on the coffee table. Inside were the damning documents, internal emails, bank statements, signed contracts, and recordings from secret meetings that left no doubt about the HOA board's corruption and their role in the looming financial disaster. Mark knew that exposing the board publicly could bring relief to Willow Creek, but it could also spark retaliation. The stakes were sky high and the clock was ticking. The foreclosure auction date was fast approaching. He gathered his closest allies in the basement of his home, a makeshift war room filled with laptops, stacks of papers, and whiteboards scribbled with timelines and strategies. "We can't just wait for the banks or the courts," Mark said, voice steady but urgent. "We need to take control ourselves." Linda, the longtime neighbor, frowned. "What do you mean?" Mark took a breath. "The board controls everything right now. But what if we bought the HOA property ourselves? The clubhouse, the pool, the land. Everything. We could stop the foreclosure by becoming the owners." A stunned silence filled the room. "That would cost a fortune," Sarah, another neighbor, whispered. Mark nodded. "I know. But with the evidence Carl gave us, we can challenge the board's authority and demand an emergency HOA meeting. We can call a special vote to replace the corrupt board and authorize buying the property. Then we pool resources or take out a community loan. If we act fast, we can stop this from destroying our homes." Jessica, on speakerphone, nodded approvingly. "Legally, it's risky, but possible. You'd be taking control away from a corrupt group and protecting the community's assets." The group debated the plan late into the night. Every risk was weighed, every worst-case scenario considered. But beneath the fear was a growing hope. The idea that they could wrest control from the shadows and reclaim their neighborhood. The next day, Mark drafted a formal petition demanding an emergency HOA meeting under the community's bylaws. He and the group collected signatures door to door, facing wary neighbors, but also a surprising number of supporters eager to stand against the board's greed. When the day of the emergency meeting arrived, the atmosphere was electric. The community clubhouse buzzed with tension and determination. The corrupt board members arrived, their confident smirks faltering when they saw the packed room of angry, united homeowners. Mark stepped forward, petition in hand. "This community deserves transparency and respect," he declared. "We are here to vote on removing the current board and authorizing the purchase of the HOA property ourselves to protect our homes and futures." The room erupted in cheers. Angela, the former HOA president, tried to interrupt, but the community's voice was overwhelming. The vote was unanimous. The corrupt board was ousted. Mark's heart raced as they took the first step toward saving Willow Creek. But even as relief washed over the crowd, a shadow lurked just beyond the celebration. Someone was watching, someone who wasn't ready to give up control so easily. The room was electric as the vote was tallied. One by one, names were called. The overwhelming majority sided with Mark and his allies. The corrupt HOA board was officially removed, and a new temporary board, Mark included, was appointed to steer Willow Creek out of crisis. Relief flooded the faces of neighbors who had been silenced for too long. Hope was finally tangible. Mark felt a surge of triumph, but also a prickling unease. The battle was far from over. With the authority of the new board, Mark and Jessica coordinated a plan to halt the foreclosure and buy the HOA property. The community pooled resources, secured emergency loans, and negotiated with the bank, buying time and leverage. Then, as Mark sifted through more of Carl's leaked files, an astonishing truth emerged. The developer who had been quietly meeting with the old board was no mere outsider. He was a major shareholder in one of the shell companies that owned the loan on the HOA property. In fact, the spa project was just a smokescreen for a hostile takeover plan. The developer's intention was to force foreclosure, then buy the property cheaply, transforming Willow Creek into a luxury gated community, displacing longtime homeowners in the process. Mark felt a chill. The stakes were even higher than he'd imagined. He immediately shared this revelation with the new board and the community. A tense meeting followed, with neighbors rallying together to fight not just corruption, but a corporate land grab threatening their very homes. Then came the twist. Carl, the whistleblower, confessed he had been approached by the developer months ago and initially helped cover up the plan, lured by promises of financial gain. But guilt had driven him to Mark, and to risking everything for the community. Mark realized the fight wasn't just against a corrupt HOA board, but a calculated corporate scheme. Determined to protect Willow Creek, Mark spearheaded a campaign combining legal action, media exposure, and community mobilization. Local news stations picked up the story, exposing the developer's plans and the board's corruption to the wider public. Pressure mounted. Quickly, the developer withdrew his bid under scrutiny, and the bank agreed to renegotiate the loan terms. Months later, the foreclosure threat was lifted. The new HOA board, led by Mark, finalized the purchase of the community property, securing it in the homeowner's control. Willow Creek began to heal. Neighbors who had once whispered in fear now celebrated together, united by the battle they'd fought and won. Mark stood at the clubhouse entrance one evening, watching children play in the pool and families gathering on the green. He smiled, knowing the neighborhood's future was safe, not because of money or power, but because of a community that refused to be silenced. And as for the spa fees, they were gone, replaced by transparency, trust, and a new era where the people truly owned their home.